Hello, welcome to New Swarm. I'm your host, Chris from the CHRILLCAST. And if you guys haven't done it already, make sure you guys go to youtube.com/CHRILLCAST or just click the button down below, subscribe to our channel. Make sure you like this video if you like what I'm talking about, and that subject would happen to be the winner of the poll from today, which is Metroid Dread hype. So we're going to be talking about Metroid series as a whole and why you should be hyped about Metroid Dread and the sales we're seeing for it. As always, if you guys want to leave your comments down below, let us know what you think about this video and what you think about Metroid Dread. All right, let's get into it. So what we have discovered is that Metroid Dread is the most pre-ordered Switch game over the last couple months, according to sales at GameStop and their official letters they've sent out in email form. So it's beat out major Switch exclusives like Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl and Shin Megami Tensei 5 even, which is quite shocking because the hype for Shin Megami Tensei 5 is unreal as well. And when you look at these beautiful graphics for Metroid Dread, you can only look and understand why this game is selling so well at this point in time. So Metroid Dread has been a long time coming, and as the first new 2D Metroid game in nearly 2 decades and the first new Metroid title since 2010, it goes without saying that the series fans are quite excited for the game. And if we look at this chart here, here is the top 10 games being sold through GameStop for the Switch. We got Metroid Dread at the top, followed by Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl double pack, followed by Mario Party Superstars, Pokemon Legends Arceus, I don't know. I don't follow Pokemon that well. Shin Megami Tensei 5, and then just the Pokemon Brilliant Diamond on its own. WarioWare Get It Together, which looks like a super fun game. Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, watched PewDiePie's playthrough of that. That was an interesting game. Sonic Colors Ultimate, of course, that one's selling well, despite the fact that it has some flaws. And then the Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp is already starting to hit the charts. And I hope it climbs that ladder a little bit because I'm excited for that one. But yeah, it's the most pre-ordered game, or most, let's see here. Yeah, the most pre-ordered Switch game starting from June 8th, right there. That's it. That's the #1 guy. And it, #1 girl, I guess, for Samus, launches for the Nintendo Switch on October 8th. So we're coming down to the wire here. It's going to be launching in less than a month. There you go. And so let's go through this here. The Metroid series has been around since 1986, with the first Metroid game coming out on the NES and the Famicom. It sold 2.73, so just under 3 million units for that game. And that was the very first Metroid game, followed by a game that I have in my collection, Metroid 2 Return of Samus, which was recently remade as Metroid Samus Returns. Not really sure why they did that title change, but there it is. There's the second game in the Metroid series. And it's quite fun, but the mechanics have aged quite horribly compared to what you see with the 3DS remake and Samus Returns. Following the Metroid 2 game, which sold just under 2 million units, you have Super Metroid, which is beloved by the entire fans of the Metroid series at just under 1.5 million sales. It is, for the most part, considered among the loyal fans of the series to be the best 2D Metroid game. Although I will say there are some competitors the later you get into this series. And there have been people still begging for a true Super Metroid sequel. In the same vein that there's a lot of Halo fans that are still begging for a true Halo 3 sequel. All right, and then after that you get Metroid Fusion, this little guy right here. Quite a fun game on the Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy Player for the GameCube. I highly recommend you check it out if you've never played it before. You can get it for, I believe, $7.99 on the Wii U if you still have one sitting around. You get in the eShop, get yourself a copy, play it on the gamepad or your TV, good to go. And that one sold just over 1.5 million units. Following that, we have Metroid Prime on the GameCube, which is to this day the best-selling Metroid game in this series. It was the first 3D one created by Retro Studios, one of the best developers for Nintendo. After that, you get Metroid Zero Mission, and the reason why it says that Metroid Dread is the first new Metroid game in the last 20 years is because this is a remake of the original Metroid. In the same vein that Metroid Samus Returns is a remake of this game. So anyways, Metroid Zero Mission sold just under 1 million copies, and I will say that is my favorite 2D Metroid game. But I haven't had nearly as much time with Super Metroid, so I might be a little biased there. Following Metroid Zero Mission, they had the classic series, the NES series for the Game Boy Advance of Metroid, which is essentially another re-release of Metroid, the original, on the Game Boy Advance, and that sold just under 500,000 copies. Following that, we get Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, which is a fun but controversial game in regards to the mechanics and the actual area you play in the game. There are a lot of repeats of scenery in this game. And then in the following after that, we have the 2DS games. We have Metroid Prime Pinball and Metroid Prime Hunters, which both of those games kind of fall short at what they do. They're decent games for the DS, but they sold about as well as you can expect. With the Metroid Prime Pinball selling just over 250,000 units, and then Metroid Prime Hunter selling just over 1 million units at 1.08. And then after that, you get onto the Wii era with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption in 2007. So we haven't had a new Metroid Prime game since 2007, which means that when Metroid Prime 4 eventually comes out, it'll be about 15 years since the last Metroid Prime game, unless you include the trilogy re-release with the Wii controls to be a new Metroid Prime game after 2007, in which case it'd be around 13 years or so. So Metroid Prime 3 Corruption was the first one to implement the new Wii controls for Metroid Prime series. After that, you get the Metroid Prime Trilogy, which was a re-release of Metroid Prime 2, and Metroid Prime 3 in one case with all three games selectable, kind of like in the same vein as the Mass Effect Legendary Edition has all three games on it. Metroid Prime Trilogy is probably one of the best ways to pick up the entire series in one disc if you haven't already. Although, with the heavy rumors that it's coming to the Switch, I would just wait. And when it comes to the Switch, if you haven't played the original Metroid Prime Trilogy, you really should try it at the very least. And if it comes to the Switch, I'm sure the controls will be fantastic. So I would recommend waiting and getting it that way. But if you're really chomping at the bit to get it and you have some money to spend, the Metroid Prime Trilogy can be yours for between $150 to $200 MSRP. And that's sold just over 500,000 copies at around 640,000 total, with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption selling just under 1.5 at 1.41 million. After that, we get probably the most controversial game in the entire series, which is Metroid Other M. You can get this little gem of a game for very little cost compared to the rest of the series. It's got some really nice gameplay. The story is where most people disagree on, because it's the first time you get a monologue from Samus, more than just like, it'd be like if the Master Chief came up and just started giving you an entire backstory as told in the narrative voice of the Chief. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for the series, especially when you consider that in Japanese culture, a very strong person, in the literary sense, doesn't talk very much. And that's Samus for you. It's just a very silent protagonist in the games. And so this one's kind of a controversial title, although I will say the gameplay of this game was very fun. After that, you get the two 3DS games. You get Federation Force, which was and it sold just over 150,000 units. And then the final game in the series prior to the Metroid Dread announcement was Metroid Samus Returns, which again, if you didn't remember, is a remake of the Game Boy game Metroid 2 Return of Samus. And that one sold just over 500,000 copies. I've heard it's really good. I've not actually played it myself, but judging by the gameplay and just the people I've talked to that have played it, it sounds like it's a fantastic game, albeit a little repetitive, just like the original where you're just hunting down Metroids and killing them. So with that, Metroid Dread being the top of the list for pre-orders for the Switch, considering how many Switch units there are out there and how hyped the Switch is on its own, we could be looking at the best-selling Switch or Metroid game in the entire series. And it doesn't have a lot of competition here. I mean, if it sells 3 million copies, it's the best-selling Metroid game ever, with the entire series selling just over 18 million units. It doesn't have a lot of competition if it sells like other Switch games have sold. And if it's outselling Pokemon games, my goodness, I bet you this game will sell between 5 and 10 million units. The hype is real for Metroid Dread, and it looks absolutely beautiful. So, if you're a Metroid fan, now's the time to get hyped. Look forward to a new generation of Metroid games on the Switch, with Metroid Dread starting it off, potentially the best-selling game in the franchise, followed by the Metroid Prime trilogy, which should be coming out in the next year or two, and Metroid Prime 4, which also should be releasing in the next year or two. It's going to be like 3 years of Metroid. Whether you want it or not, here we are. So the hype is real. Comment down below what you guys think about the Metroid series in general. And if you have a favorite game from the series, feel free to comment that below as well. Would love to know what your favorite game in the Metroid series is. And tell me about why you're hyped for Metroid Dread, Metroid Prime Trilogy, and Metroid Prime 4. As always, I'm Chris from the CHRILLCAST. Make sure you guys subscribe, like this video, and we'll see you on the next news swarm. Make sure you vote in the polls so you can pick the next topic. See y'all later.